G'day, g'day. This is the Heroes Podcast. I've got a new guest today, and her name is Christy Holt. How are you, Christy?
Hi, I'm fantastic. How about you today?
Thanks. Before we jump in, I just want to intro you right in the beginning so people know who you are, who I am connecting with today, but you are connecting them with as well. So she's a self-proclaimed happy Hussy coach, podcast host, creating your happy inspiration for conscious women, available wherever you listen. And she calls it the Unstuck for Women, available on Amazon. Oh, hang on. She's the author of the Unstuck for Women on Amazon, who loves to show people, there it is, the book is there, show people how to get out of survival mode so that they can consciously create the happy life, relationships, and the impact they desire. So yes, Christy is a coach for whole as humans. I never heard that before. Using her signature CREATE method, she journeys alongside of her soul-led clients to support and love them as they discover and unlearn. Oh, this is a mouthful. Where do we start? How did this start for you, Christy? This must have a story behind it, right? Tell me about the challenges.
No, you know it. I mean, ultimately, I wouldn't be where I am today without all of that story and without all of those experiences that I've had that have shaped me, along the way. So as far as the things that I'm putting out there today, they come from my personal experience and my journey. And I just know, having overcome some obstacles and figured out some things, maybe like the hard way, that I would love to share with those tools and those strategies with people to help them to do it a little bit more easily and maybe a little bit more quickly, right? A lot of what I share is well over a decade worth of personal growth and development, and probably hundreds of books that I love reading. So it's a compilation of my own life experience, my own, I'm going to call it like personal interest, research, and just trying out a whole lot of different tools to see what works and what doesn't work, or whatever. So the reason that I kind of got to where I am today was because I was stuck. This is why I wrote a book called Unstuck for Women. I was stuck. I was there, and oh my gosh, I was there for a really long time, actually. And, when I was there, I experienced a lot of overthinking. I experienced a lot of anxiety and overwhelm. I had these thought and emotional spirals that would just take off. One thought would send my whole mind into a storm of chaos. And when that was all happening, the uncertainty really made me feel overwhelmed, and I felt really helpless to change things. And so when I actually made the shift and realized I'm the one who can change the things, it was kind of a aha, like, holy smokes, this is me. I'm the common denominator in all of my problems. And then I also have this simultaneously realization that if I'm the common denominator in the problems, I'm also the common denominator of the solutions. So shifting out of sort of this victim mentality where I felt helpless and overwhelmed and anxious and allowed my thoughts to run wild, taking back my power, which, when I look back, I can say I never gave away my power. That's not something that we can actually do. It's a bit of an illusion, but I felt like I had given away my power. And so when I rediscovered it was there waiting for me all along, and that I just had to sort of step up and save myself, that's when everything really shifted for me. So I really wanted to share the tools that I uncovered along the way, because I know they can help people to shift out of those overthinking, overwhelm, super anxious, all that self-doubt, and just living a life that doesn't live up to what you're really wanting.
Christy, tell me about what specifically did you go through? So most people want to know. I understand anxiety and, feeling held back and lost. Was it at a school time? What was the specific things that you've been dealing with and you could not resolve? I love the example of maybe if you have a few stories about lack of self-worth.
I do have a few stories of lack of self-worth. I promise you that. at the time where I really had this sort of pivotal realization that like, it's me, I was in a marriage that was not healthy. It was very, I don't know, we weren't able to communicate. We weren't able to connect. And I actually think I'm a pretty good communicator. So this was exceptionally frustrating for me. We didn't have a very strong emotional connection. And so, and then also I was a mom. I'm a mom to 3 and now a bonus son. So I have 4 teenage boys now. But at the time I had my 3 young kids, they were all under 10, 3 boys. It was chaos, let me tell you. But I had really sort of slipped into this, well, a few things. One, I call it just a momitis, where I was just focused on being a mom. I was, oh my God, I was overgiving. I was people pleasing. I was doing everything for everyone else, but I was not taking time for me or to figure out what I wanted. I wasn't using my voice. I didn't even know what my voice was anymore. I really got sucked into this just a momitis. And I really felt like I had kind of lost myself and the trajectory. I wasn't sure where I was going because I was so focused on raising my family that I didn't see anything really beyond that. So I was really sort of stuck in this. And then this sort of unhealthy, unhappy relationship on top of it just really made me feel like I wasn't loved, like I wasn't being seen. I wasn't accepted for who I was. I was really, really stuck in this people-pleasing, perfectionist sort of path where I felt like I was never good enough. And that does come down to this idea of self-worth. And until I realized really at this moment, like, oh my gosh, I'm the problem. You know, like I said this before, I'm like channeling Taylor Swift, I'm the problem, it's me, right? And realizing that, okay, if I'm the problem, I'm also the answer, I'm the solution. But in that time, I was just sort of like, up until that moment, trying to put my family first, trying to hold everything together. I didn't want to break up my family. Nobody wants to do that. I didn't want to face the uncertainty because I really was unsure what the response was going to be by my ex if I asked for what I thought I needed, which was initially I asked for some space, some time apart. You know, there's a whole lot of uncertainty behind, should I stay or should I go? Right. And I really felt paralyzed by that uncertainty. And so ultimately that realization that I actually had been staying because I thought that was what was best for my kids led me to realize what's best for my kids is if I take care of me. And so I realized I needed to make a change, take a step, do something different to start moving towards the life that I wanted. And let's be honest, these kids don't listen. They're not listening to what you're saying. All they hear is mama, mama, mama. This is like Charlie Brown. But what they are doing is watching you. They're observing you, right? And so your actions, if they're not integrity, like your words mean nothing. And so I really realized I need to go first. And like, you know, the proverbial oxygen mask on the airplane, like I need to go first and I need to lead the way and show my kids how it's done rather than just hoping and praying that if we don't have a broken home, that they're just going to somehow turn out all right. I wanted to show them, how do we navigate life's challenges, right? How do we discover who we are and what we're meant to do? And how do we, you know, move through that uncertainty? Because the truth is uncertainty is where all the opportunities and possibilities lie. And so if we stay in our familiar comfort zone, we are really limiting what we're able to accomplish in life. So I really wanted to just, you know, lead them by showing the way and going first.
This is deep. You talked about perfectionism. There's so much that I've been through. Moms stuck, taking care of everyone else, losing themselves. And then you talked about kids. I've been through this where I was not credible to my children anymore. I was teaching something and I was being someone else. And that just doesn't go down well. So what happened? Do you now live separately? Are you now taking charge of your life? And tell us, like, I want to know the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, so initially, like I said, I initially just thought I wanted space. As it turned out, my request for space was met with a request for a divorce. And here we are. But the truth is we can't I had spent a lot of time waiting for circumstances to change, waiting for him to maybe shift something. But during that whole time, I was blinded to my own responsibility. I was sitting back almost in a way, hoping things would change, but not really taking personal responsibility. So, long story short, we did go through a divorce. We've been apart for about, I don't know, about 6 years now. Co-parenting still can be a bit of an adventure. That's okay. Life is an adventure, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I honestly wouldn't even, a lot of times I have thought about, would I go back and go through this again, or would I change something or do something differently? And the answer I always come to is that I wouldn't be who I am today without having gone through all of that. With all of that, oh my gosh, it was horrible. There was really dark times. There were times where I didn't know if I could go on or how I could go on. I just knew that my kids needed me. And so that was like a small thread that had me sort of hanging on and moving forward. But as I kind of shifted through that, at the end of the day, I actually found my most amazing partner. We have been together about 5 years now, which is how I have a bonus son. It's absolutely fantastic. And the truth is, I was absolutely very intentionally not looking for a relationship when we met. And so it's kind of interesting how that works out. But he did meet all of the criteria that I had sort of envisioned for an ideal relationship for me when the time came, but I was really not looking. And it's kind of funny how the universe works and plops the right people into your life at just the perfect time. And I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have this amazing relationship if I didn't learn all of that stuff about myself through the process of being in that difficult relationship, through the process of, overcoming just a momitis to figure out who the hell I was. And, actually taking action to step into being that person that I wanted to be, instead of just sort of wishing and hoping, right? When I was stuck, I was just doing a lot of hoping and wishing and like counting on external circumstances to shift so that I could then adjust myself. But that's not how it works, right? And I know that now, but I sure didn't know that then. So if we have any listeners that are feeling really stuck and sort of, hopeless to your circumstances, like, first of all, I see you and I send you so much love. And second of all, I want you to know how incredibly powerful you are. And so I, ultimately want people to know the difference is that relationship with self, and building that nice, strong foundational relationship with yourself. Learning how to love yourself is going to open up the world to you. It's going to change your relationships. It's going to change your life experience. It's going to literally change the world around you and your experience of it. So learning to love yourself is, ultimately sort of my mission to share how that is so impactful. And the first piece is getting unstuck, because when I was stuck and I had all of this anxious thoughts running out of control, there was no space for this, right? My mind was overgone. My nervous system was always on like top speed, and there was no space for conscious thinking. There was no space for choosing or intention. It was just survive. And so when you're in that space, it can be really hard to think about possibilities and opportunities that lie outside your comfort zone, because it can feel in your body absolutely terrifying. And so the first kind of step is really creating this space so that you can consciously choose for yourself. How are you going to show up? How are you going to respond versus reacting out of this sort of autopilot response, so that you can start creating? Because that's what you're a creator. You're here to create the life, relationship, business, impact, legacy of your dreams. And the only thing that's in your way is typically you, right? This is my experience. The only thing that's really been in my way has been myself getting in my own way.
Yes, this resonates so much. I wanted to ask you, do you see romantic relationships as the absolute personal development tool?
You know what? All relationships, I think, fit in that category. I think that, and actually it's interesting that you asked this, because I'm writing my next book, which is actually going to be about getting unstuck in your relationships. Teeny spoiler alert, it is going to be foundationally based on that relationship with self. But like you said, ultimately relationships, and this romantic or otherwise, honestly, I think my children have been probably my greatest teachers and have taught me the most about me out of anyone. But I think people have a bit of a misconception about relationships, and often, and this is probably due to societal conditioning and the fairy tale and all of this, people go into a relationship thinking, what can they give me? And the truth is when you go in with that, now you have expectations. And actually, those expectations already are creating a barrier to your happiness, to your success. And now you're not there to make someone else happy, and they can't make you happy. That's also an illusion. Your happiness, your success, your peace, your love, your joy, your abundance is not out there in the world. You create that within. And so when you get into a relationship, the key focus really ought to be, what can I give? Right. And I don't mean this in an overgiving way, because there is a tendency for many people, myself included, to be an overgiver, to nurture, to go beyond, to go to the extreme where, we're martyring ourselves and it's costing us. So I'm not talking about going that far, but looking at it without expectation, looking at the other person with compassion, being like, hey, they're a cool person. I accept them as they are. And listen, if you can't accept your partner as a human, like, as I say, a whole ass human, someone who is whole and complete just as they are, perfectly imperfect, if you can't get on board with accepting them and you feel like you need them to change, they're not the right fit for you. Okay, that is the plain and simple truth, but people don't want to look at that. They like to look at the potential of the person instead of what is the reality in front of them. And so we can get really sucked into codependent relationships and just generally unhealthy relationships where it's not a fit. And when we ignore these, kind of obvious red flags, like, it's not a fit, and there's nothing good, bad, right, or wrong about it. It's just, when you're not a good match, you're not a good match. Like, that's is just the way it is. And you might be better suited to move on to someone who you can accept as they are. Because I really think that the more you accept someone, the more you unconditionally offer them that acceptance and love, the more motivated they are to live up to their highest potential. And ultimately, that's what gets you sort of, what you want in this elevated person growing alongside you. And the nagging and the expectations and the trying to prod them, it don't work. So fully embracing and accepting is literally, to me, the catalyst to actually, creating change.
I wanted to unpack one piece, and I heard you. That really got me when you said, if you are unable to accept another person, then you may be in the wrong relationship. And I've been working through on our differences and our patterns in my marriage as well. And I discovered, and maybe you want to expand on this one, I wanted her to change. So I was not in full acceptance, I admit that, but I realized probably I'm not accepting myself fully. So we were lucky, we are still together. We didn't have to go separate ways. She was growing as well, although different ways. What would you say to this?
Well, like I said earlier, it ultimately does all come back to that foundational relationship with yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And that lack of acceptance, like you say, it does typically actually mirror back to you something that, you are needing to look at. So if you are feeling really, and I think that what I'm saying here about, like, if you can't accept them, that's more of like a when you're getting to know them kind of thing. And then you, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, they'll change. And you have this sort of expectation that they're going to do what you think that they should do, right? That's more what I was alluding to. But you're right, this absolutely can show up as a projection of our own insecurities and expecting others to, ironically, be someone they're not because we want them to meet our standards. And then yet on the flip side, we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to be told what we need to change. We already know. So often we can take that as a bit of a reflection back and think, okay, well, what is the lesson here for me? How might I need to work on accepting myself? And again, this ties back again a little bit to the self-worth piece, because if we don't think we're worthy, we can have a lot of these sort of projections coming up for us to look at, to identify, because ultimately we're on a journey to grow and learn and expand. And everything basically contains an opportunity to, shift and understand something at a deeper level.
Oh, I love that one. I love that one because I love to grab those supposedly tiny things that people get triggered about or emotionally, getting carried away. They all have a seed
Nugget.
of
Yep.
transformation in them, because that's where the magic is. The magic is in the setbacks. The magic is in sometimes not getting what one really wants. So
Yeah.
who are your typical clients who are coming to you to be helped?
Well, typically the clients that I work with are most often moms, but they're women for the most part who are struggling with sort of these thought loops that they can't seem to break out of. They are maybe feeling like they're not good enough, and probably also that they're too much all at the same time, which is an interesting paradox, which is again alluding to this need to be freaking perfect. Because if you're too much and not enough, like how can you ever measure up? Because you're both of those things. That doesn't even, there's no room for you to actually be you. Ultimately, my vision is to help walk alongside of as many whole ass humans, because you are whole, whether you recognize it or not, help you unlearn, uncover, those pieces of you that maybe you've tucked away, you've hidden away. They may not have been safe before to express, and really uncover your voice so that you can start to navigate life's challenges. So you can create the life, the relationship, the business, the world impacted legacy without getting in your own way, because we so often will get in our own way, and it's crummy. But it also, and we can end up feeling so powerless in those situations. But the truth is, we're not powerless. We're actually incredibly powerful. We just need to recognize our power and use it. So, really getting out of our own way, building that confidence, right? And I don't know if am I allowed to swear on your show?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I love to help people to become unfuckwithable, which to me just means nothing is getting in your way. You're not triggered by a stranger on the internet, right? You have the tools and resources to move through challenging emotions, obstacles, difficult relationships with a little bit more ease and flow, because you have this foundational relationship with yourself that says, I'm worthy, I'm enough, and I don't need to do anything to prove any of that. And I'm going to do my thing, and no one is going to stop me from doing it.
Ooh, this is really good. The word that comes to me is bulletproof. That's
Yeah.
not the term that I normally use, where there is just one is aligned to a purpose and things don't matter. Things become details,
Yeah.
tiny events that most people magnify,
Oh, we sure do.
then take themselves down, dragging themselves on the rabbit hole emotionally. They won't happen.
Yeah.
They become probably emotionally resilient or highly optimistic. So tell me, what could you say to someone who is in that place, not getting what they want in a relationship, maybe distracted by kids, things to do? How is there a breakout? How could it happen?
I mean, it sounds really cliche to say ultimately you need to make a decision, but that is the truth, because you need to stand up and decide for yourself. Like, there's no amount of, I could stand up here and say, this is what I did and it worked for me. But until you decide, I want to do something different. And sometimes this looks like hitting a rock bottom, quote unquote. This doesn't have to be like extreme tragedy. It just is your rock bottom where you decide, I have to do something different. And so there's two times to make change. One is now, and the other is when you get so freaking uncomfortable that you have to fucking make a change. And I'll tell you which one's easier. It is the first, right? It is much easier to change when you are in a more positive space. I mean, ultimately, the time to do the work is not when you're in a deep depression, right? I mean, sometimes you have to step up and do the things, but it is much easier to do the work when you're feeling good and you're in a good space, and you can really fortify, rebuild those neural pathways that have you moving towards, positive thinking, and, no more limiting beliefs, no more limiting stories, no more cock blocking yourself and keeping yourself small and safe, but creating the safety for yourself so that you can start expanding that comfort zone and going after all of the possibility and opportunities that, yeah, they do seem scary because they're out there in the uncertain, right? They're not inside your cozy little comfort zone. So it can be a little scary, but with the right tools, with the right resources, you can expand that comfort zone and go after those big dreams and become unfuckwithable.
I love this. I love this word that you come up. I've never heard this before. Let me ask you this. Proportionately, you tend to see people coming to you to transform. And what proportion of them has gone to that rock bottom? Basically, no more chance left to stay the same. And how much of them are in the place where they feel this is really not working, I need to seek help, I need to change? What is your experience?
Well, like I say, I think this rock bottom is a little bit subjective, right? So everyone's going to sort of have a different, I'm going to say trigger point where they're like, oh, okay, that's enough of that, right? And it could really be different for everybody. Maybe it's you have to lose everything before you realize. And maybe for other people, you're just feeling something within calling you. So it's really, I'd say it's really all over the map, because everyone kind of defines this rock bottom or this extreme discomfort and this need to move. It's like I don't know, a restlessness, even maybe just in some people, that just says, oh, there's got to be something better than this. And that's kind of what nudged me in the first place, was like, I know there's got to be more than this. There's got to be something better. And in my soul, in my being, I knew there was something more. I don't know, I can't even explain. I just knew, if I consulted my inner self, I just there is definitely something better than this. And I really do think I'm worthy and deserving of, this different kind of relationship, this different kind of life. And I had to get uncomfortable enough, I guess, with where I was at. But that's really all a matter of personal preference. And to me at that time, I wasn't sure what was going to happen in the relationship. But I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to start using my voice and asking for what I needed, because otherwise I was destined to stay stuck there indefinitely until I did. Right. I was really stuck in this blame and the criticizing, the complaining, the excuses. I was waiting for everything else around me to shift. But what really shifted was when I took personal responsibility. I like to call it radical responsibility, just taking responsibility for me, setting aside the judgments, the blame, the shame, the excuses, the judgments. I might have said judgments twice. But all of those kind of things that were going around in my mind, really setting those aside and figuring out, okay, but what is it that I want to experience? Because I think, my perspective is that we are a spiritual being here having a human experience. We're the life force energy of the universe. Basically, we're all made of the same energy. And so we're here to have an experience, and what that experience looks like is up to you. I mean, it really could look like anything. There is nothing that is off limits in this experience that you could be creating. The truth is, we just sometimes really get stuck in some of the conditioning of the world. There's a lot of things that we take on board as beliefs simply from observation, our parents, our schooling, our friends, whatever, all of these things. And we often will take them on, and we'll even build our identity upon them. This thing worked for me, and so I'm going to keep doing that thing, right? People pleasing or perfectionism or working hard to prove ourselves, all of these sort of things. And so we get a little bit distracted. But the truth is, we can be free of that, and we can become the creator of our experience and curate the experience that we want to have. And I mean, who doesn't want that ultimately? I mean, I think most of us want that. The truth is, most of us are not blocking that on purpose. We just don't see a way out. We may not think we're worthy of a way out. And so there's sort of this connection, mind, body, soul, bring them back into, into unity, into harmony, so that we can take those actions that actually move us towards the life we want. I coined a new phrase this morning, actually, which is like winging it with purpose. Because when we step into what is unknown, this uncertain zone, a place we haven't been before, we can still be moving towards what we want, even if we don't know all of the steps. And so it's kind of like watching it unfold, like an epic story, one step at a time. And we're just taking one step at a time towards, that end destination, but not getting too hung up on the end destination, because it's actually about the journey anyways, rather than that end destination. We humans love to have an end destination, but if we remember that it's ultimately about the experience, we can become more present and literally create more of the experiences we want right here, right now, instead of, waiting for whenever something might happen in the future.
Very insightful. There is choice, and a lot of people have forgotten that.
Yeah.
Especially for me, a big one, and for many, I think, when you said, I consulted with myself. Well, I was so shut down emotionally, so disconnected from myself, that I didn't know who I am or what I wanted. I had this tiny inner yearning for something new, something different. That pretty much kept me going, and the hope that there maybe there is another experience to life. But so for some people, and maybe you could just give us a small example, when I always look back towards the past, because that's what we do, some people, like, then I saw broken people who have dysfunctional relationships, parents and children who are in a similar but not the same crappy situation.
Yeah. And the truth is, I don't believe we're broken. And actually, that's why I call it like the whole ass human. I actually think we're inherently whole. We are born whole. It's just that we've forgotten some parts of us and we've rejected some parts of us. And so actually, by embracing and actually loving and accepting, especially those parts that feel so hard to love, maybe the angry part that you repressed and hid away because as a child you were told to calm down and be quiet, maybe the emotions that you've disconnected yourself from. And I know so many people feel like they are too much because they are emotional. And so, maybe they've been labeled as you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. And so they disconnect, right? So they're taking the mind and body, they're disconnecting. And so they're not even in touch with their emotions. And so when we're operating from that place, it is really hard. And so in order to really get this unity back, we have to learn to, we have to build some emotional intelligence, get reconnected inside this meat suit, so that the things are working in harmony together to take us towards what we want. And this idea of creating might sound really foreign if you're super stuck. If you're living in survival mode, like you're literally like, oh my God, coffee, kids, drive, go do the work, do the thing, make the money, come home, go to bed, sleep, repeat. So there may not feel like there's a lot of autonomy available, but the truth is you are sovereign. You do have the choice. And now if you don't feel like you're able to exercise your choice, it's probably because you're functioning in survival mode. So it's all on autopilot, which doesn't leave a lot of space for intentional creation because everything's just kind of going. It's running in the background, right? And so ultimately, my book is about getting unstuck from that autopilot survival mode function so that you're less triggered, you're less stuck, you're feeling a little bit more hopeful, you're going to be able to build more confidence, you're going to be able to navigate relationships, right? And you're going to be able to start creating with purpose instead of just living out purely from reactions as we go. You can start to plan. Now you can maybe wing it on purpose.
Yes, yes, it's so, I love how you put it. I sometimes just use the term living out the program, or the conditioning of the mind, which left to its own devices, it is a time, it's a bomb with a timer.
In my book, I refer to, like, so we all know, here's a little tidbit. If you have this sort of like ongoing dialogue inside your head, like these negative thought loops, because I know I've had them. So I know a lot of people recognize this ongoing thought loop. You can identify with it. Like you can end up thinking like, this is me. I'm just a terrible person and I'm a trash talk myself all the time. The truth is those thoughts are not you. And if you can zoom out and observe those thoughts in passing, I call this in my book, the asshole mind, because it's the part of your mind that's just thoughts, thoughts. A lot of them are very fear driven. And again, when we're operating in survival mode, these thoughts are just coming at us and we got no defense mechanism. We need to be able to stop the thoughts and look at them from a distance, not identify ourselves with them, right? So that we can be clear about which ones we're going to take on board, because we can change our thoughts. We can rewire our brain until the moment that we die, our brain is, neuroplastic. So we can make new neural pathways, have new thought patterns on loop. I mean, hello, anybody want an upward thought spiral, like a positive thought spiral where you wonder how much better it can get, right? Instead of like, how can I go on? How can it get better? And so this part of your mind, this asshole mind, ultimately its entire purpose, and I'm going to say this is also like connected to the reticular activating system, which is your brain filter that kind of filters in what information, based on what your filter is set to. And if your filter is kind of set to what you're experiencing now and you don't like that, you can change that. You might not recognize that you can change it because it feels like it's just happening and you're out of control and it's not something you can change, but you can. And so this is what getting unstuck is all about. And inside my book, I share the tools of creating it's basically a toolbox for navigating that initial survival reaction time so that we can move through that and then respond, right? With intention, with consciousness, with purpose, and choose for ourselves. So basically, getting us back to our free will, if you will, instead of just living it out on autopilot.
That piece, what you said, is so widespread, epidemic, where I see people unconsciously focusing on what's not working. And they keep creating more and more of it while they are becoming essentially the victim of their own mind.
And they're not doing it on purpose. Like nobody's doing this on purpose. No one is like, I'm just going to like totally screw myself up here and I'm just going to self-sabotage and everything else. And actually have a completely, maybe unique perspective on self-sabotage. I don't think anybody is intentionally getting in their own way or cock blocking themselves on purpose. Like who would do that? Nobody is doing that. It's ultimately the safety mechanism. It's the requirement for you to feel safe to move forward. This safety thing is what is keeping you really stuck in those loops. And so you've got to figure out how to work with that safety, create safety so that you can expand that comfort zone, right? And ultimately, this is what the asshole mind wants, to keep you safe. And what is safe is what is familiar. What is familiar is what is based on your past. Now, if you don't like that story, it's got you in the victim position and you're not loving that. And you're, dragging this heavy weight of pain and suffering everywhere you go. The good news is you can set it down. The permission slip to do that, the permission slip to set it down, to forgive, to let go, to release yourself from all of this pain and suffering is up to you. You're the only one that can issue that permission slip. And that is, ultimately how you go from victim mentality. And I'm, again, not talking about like victims of abuse or anything. I'm talking about just the mindset of like, nothing goes my way and I'm really unlucky and everything, is terrible and I can't do anything about it. So to shift out of that into becoming the hero of your own story, you've got to step up. You've got to take that personal responsibility and say, okay, what am I creating and how can I shift that? Sometimes it helps to have a mentor that can help you to pick that apart, because with that filter on, we actually have this sort of inherent bias to like stay safe. And some of those things that we really need to look at so that we can reframe them, we have sort of this internal need to like not see it, right? We don't want to see that. We don't want to recognize it, because what happens when we know better, we have to do better. And sometimes that feels really fucking overwhelming. So we just don't want to go there, right? But, you know, this is just the way I am, or this is just the way things are, is actually a really terrible excuse to stay right where you're at, because ultimately the power is in your hands. No one's coming to save you. You've got to save yourself. And if there's one thing I can, you know, whatever, just hit home run to everybody to understand, like, it's up to you, right?
Yes, I reflected on this in one sentence just lately. Is life is probably just a game you play in your head, and everything else is just a reflection.
It does really feel
Right.
like a simulation a lot of times, doesn't it? Like, we ultimately do, in a way, create our experience of the reality around us, because there is nothing out there that isn't passed by that filter, right? There's actually a whole lot out there that exists that's not coming into our filter. But what I mean is our experience of it, it's all coming through that filter. So if you want to have a different experience of the world, you've got to shift that filter to start bringing in some different pieces of what's out there. Because the pieces that you're experiencing that suck or are terrible or not enjoyable are not all there is. But
Yeah.
we've got to just start looking for what we want instead, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very powerful one. I just wanted to share this. I met this woman the other night. She's absolutely probably the stuck one you would be able to have. But she said to me, she does not believe this. She does not believe there are these. She's seeing the world through filters, and she thinks change is impossible. And I said, well, just do one thing. Make a decision and commit to this, and let's see how the magic happens. And that's all. You just need to leave 1% chance, so we can do that piece transformation one step at a time and see what unfolds for you. So what would you be celebrating in 5 years' time, Christy, if things went ballistic, amazing for you?
Well, I have a huge vision of impacting 1 million people. And so I have, between my book, and I'm writing another book, and I got a couple other books up in the noggin, my podcast, Create Your Happy, and through networking, collaborating, coaching, all of these things, I'm really hoping that I'm going to, not hoping, I'm in the process of impacting 1 million lives. And then from there, I know that that ripple effect is going to, who knows, maybe it's going to actually impact billions. And I really truly believe that this change comes from the inside out. And like this beautiful human that felt so stuck and yet so hopeless, the truth is, if you don't believe, you are blocking yourself, which is this a really annoying part, because man, if you just could have like that little bit of belief and trust that it was going to work, that actually a lot of times is the missing piece that is actually going to shift and make that thing for you. Like, if you believe that magic and miracles can happen, and I'm like defining magic as kind of loose, like, you know, things that appear out of nowhere or things that maybe seem impossible. If you believe that they are possible for you. If you don't believe that they're possible, you're not going to experience it, because you're not looking for it. You're not creating it. You're not taking action towards it. So you are literally just keeping yourself out of having that solution. And I talk about this with my kids a lot, because they are very much, the asshole mind is in control, right? Like teenagers, they're just like very me, what I need, what I want. And they're very, very quick to point fingers, to displace the blame, you know, to, it's his fault. And I tell all the time, the more you stay focused on the problems, the more you experience the problems. Okay. So if we can shift away from that, it does not matter whose fault it was. We don't need to have someone to blame. This has nothing to do with the solution, right? That keeps us focused in problem mode. And if we want to shift, well, that's actually very solution avoidant, right? When we're focused on the problem, we're actually completely missing the obvious solutions, the creative solutions that potentially exist right there. So we've got to shift away from that blame game, the complaining, the external stuff, take that personal responsibility. What can I do to change this? Because that is the only way things are going to shift and change and move forward in the way that you want. And that's how you can become, solutions focused.
Powerful. So where could the audience, so whoever's listening to this video, find you? Do you want to share your website or contacts?
Well, you can check out my website, which also houses information about both my book and my podcast, as well as some other offers that I have. It's coachchristyholt.com. I do have direct links for the podcast and the book, so I can send those as well your way, Andre, and you can share whatever suits. I love new friends, so feel free to connect with me on Facebook. Let me know where you came from. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this message, or if you had any ahas or anything that resonated with you, I would absolutely love to hear that. As I am trying to help create this sort of impact in the world, it does mean the world to me to hear that it has made, even a tiny impact here or there, because I know the ripple effects can be huge. And I think that kind of covers it. Yes,
we will have all Christy's details under the video, so you just have to click below and find the book and the podcast and her website. Is there anything else that you would want to share before our last golden nugget, before we say goodbye? I would love to have this conversation going for a few hours, but it's time.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it was this idea that we're not broken. We don't need fixing. We're just humans, and embracing all parts of us is really a catalyst to moving forward, to creating that life that we truly want. And all change ultimately comes from the inside out. So beginning with that relationship with self, diving into building up that self-worth, kicking that, inner critic to the curb, ditching the people pleasing and perfectionism, all that should energy, like the good girl energy, all the conditioning, and really stripping that away to figure out, who am I and who do I want to be, right? And this is ultimately at the root of it. We are love. We're intended to love ourselves, to love other people. And to me, that is the path to changing the entire world. So if we could all learn to truly love ourselves and accept ourselves, I think the world would be a much different place.
Christy, thank you very much. It was a wonderful time to connect and share these. I love your genius, how you have been able to uncover you from being a mom, which is more than full-time job, I believe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.